Okay, so we're going to continue now with Chris Boshuizen, the founder of PlanetLabs. And PlanetLabs, they have launched a series of Earth observation satellites. They had a demonstration project, and then they started 28 Earth observing satellites from the International Space Station. And there's bigger plans ahead. And Chris is going to talk to us about it. So welcome, Chris. Welcome to Bremen. And tell us how to do startups the San Francisco way.
Excellent. Great. Well, thanks for having me. And sorry I couldn't make it out to Bremen. Let me just turn the sound down at my end a little bit. So if anyone can't hear me, just let me know, okay? Thanks, Magni, for the invitation to speak today. And I'm sorry I couldn't be out there. I wanted to talk a little bit, about PlanetLabs, but I was asked to talk about how we got started and how to run a startup essentially. But I thought I would go back a little more in time and tell the story from the beginning. So if we could switch to the slides, that would be great. Just let me know if the slides are up. Excellent. So this is, of course, a pin from Yuri's night, and this is one of mine from 2008 when we ran one of the large Yuri's night parties at NASA Ames Research Center. And first of all, I want to congratulate you all for having this fantastic event on Yuri's night or the weekend of. And I think it's great to see such a large global celebration of space. Why this is important to me is that I think that probably the most important factor going into creating the company that I have now and the space ecosystem has been the network of people that I've met over the last decade. And so before Yuri's night, I actually met my co-founders at the Space Generation Congress in 2002 in Houston. And I was a regular attendee at various space conference events, including the IAC and the Space Generation over, largely a decade, and I still attend. So if there's one piece of advice I can give you, and you don't hear anything else in the rest of my talk, is that events like the one you're holding now and other events are really probably the most important thing you can do, because that's where you're going to meet the people that you might want to start a company with. And PlanetLabs, as an idea, took Will and I and Robbie over a decade to come up with. And it was the, conclusion of a 10-year conversation with my friends about how to do something useful and peaceful in space and what was wrong with the space industry, why was it so expensive, why was it so frustrating. And it's actually 10 years of drinking wine, drinking whiskey, drinking beer, drinking sake in Japan, all these different countries where we traveled together to conferences where we were talking about the problem of space exploration and how to do something useful. And so most success stories, like they say, an overnight success is 10 years in the making. So the things we're doing now are really just the end of a 10-year conversation and the start of something new and interesting. So I think, my main encouragement is get together, talk after the conference, really think about the problems you're trying to solve, and you don't have to solve them this weekend, but the friendships that you have today and the ones you'll gain in the future might be key to solving the problem, doing something really interesting. So after meeting Will and Robbie at the Space Generation, I ended up at NASA Ames Research Center with the both of them. And we were working on what we called low-cost lunar landers. And so in this slide, you can see a small vehicle, which is the HTV, which is a precursor to the LADEE spacecraft. So LADEE was at the time a low-cost program, about $80 million by NASA standards. And it was pretty exciting to work on that. However, by the time the mission launched, it was $240 million. So we were a little disappointed that the cost had grown so much. And we were wondering, what did we do wrong? Why did our low-cost program become, in the end, only a sort of slightly low-cost program? By NASA standards, $240 million is still good, but we wanted to do better. At the time, Will and I had a gentleman by the name of Pete Klupa, who used to pull his phone out of his pocket, and he would wave his phone around at conferences and say, "My phone is better than your satellite." So this was 2008, and at that time I think he had a US government issued Palm Pilot or BlackBerry, so it wasn't even a real phone. But his point was that it had a computer, an IMU, radios, memory, storage, and so it had most of what was in a satellite. And so why were satellites like the one that we built for LADI so expensive and so old? In fact, the computer in LADI is a PowerPC from the mid-'80s, so it's a 25-year-old computer architecture that we were flying. But his phone was a new architecture. So we ended up, because NASA Ames is in California next to Google, we got hold of some of the early Android phones. And there was a funny moment where two kids from Google rode over on their bikes in their black hoodies, Google hoodies, on their colorful red, yellow, green, blue bikes to the NASA security, who were holding pistols, tasers, and batons. And they pulled out of their pocket a Ziploc bag of these phones right in front of the guards and sort of just passed them across discreetly to us. It was very suspicious looking. But, you know, we got a whole bunch of these phones and we tested them. In this picture, you can see an Android phone in a vacuum chamber being tested at 10 to the minus 6 torr. I'm sorry for the lack of metric system. The US has damaged me permanently. But, you know, the 10 to the minus 6 torr is almost near vacuum. And you can see in this picture, the phone is still working, the screen is on, and it looks pretty happy. So we were like, wow, phones might actually work in space. The next thing we wanted to test was, could they, you know, survive launch, and could they do something useful? So we did a sort of range of vibration and shock testing programs at NASA, and eventually went out and launched a rocket from the desert. This video won't play over the WebEx, but I'm going to send it around after the talk, and you can watch it. And it's just a little 60-second video showing a phone attached to the inside of a rocket with the camera pointing out, recording the video of the suborbital flight, and using its internal accelerometers to measure the takeoff and descent of the rocket. And so with this video and the preceding data from our tests, the vacuum tests and the vibration tests, we were able to convince NASA that we could build a small satellite out of a phone and put it in space. Not everything went well. On one of our tests, the rocket crashed and landed in the desert. And you can see in this picture, the phone is twisted and broken a little bit. But I think there were about 4 payloads on that rocket. One of them was a NASA science mission about 1 meter long in the upper stage of the rocket. And on impact to the ground, that experiment compressed down to about maybe 8 centimeters in length. The entire thing crunched down like an accordion and landed on the phone and sort of ingloriously smashed the screen, drove the phone into the ground, and we had to dig it out with a shovel. But we were the only experiment that still had data. The phone was actually, after we took it out, put the battery back in, was still running, and we'd recorded data all the way down to the ground and had data on the SD card. So all other experiments were destroyed, and the phone had data. So this is sort of like the third proof point for us that phones were extremely robust, extremely reliable, could do useful things, and potentially work in space. So with that, we were like, well, let's put it in a box and put it in space. And this is a sort of early conceptual prototype of what a phone-based satellite might look like. And just to be cheeky, we decided we would put the entire phone in there and screen everything. The only thing we took out was the batteries, because they're flat lithium polymer batteries, and they don't really like being in a vacuum but for very long. But we added an extra battery and added a radio, and we had PhoneSat. And this is a final picture of PhoneSat. This is a $3,000 satellite. And in 2012, NASA launched 3 PhoneSats into orbit and took pictures from space with the phone camera and downlinked those back to the ground. One of the cool things, this is, by the way, was a balloon launch that we did. at NASA, to launch the PhoneSat, we convinced them that we didn't want to do any reviews. And so this spacecraft was launched with almost no paperwork, and which is extremely unprecedented at NASA. And this photograph from a video of us doing a suborbital balloon flight was what we considered to be the documentation for the flight readiness review that this thing would work in space. And so NASA took a risk, launched 3 of these, and it worked really well. And we got these really cool pictures. We actually launched the PhoneSat without a ground station and relied on ham radio operators around the world to collect pieces of the pictures and send them back to us. So we sent down little 200-byte chunks over a APRS beacon, and those got picked up and sent back to us by email, and we reassembled the pictures at headquarters in NASA Ames. And so this is one of the pictures of the Earth taken by the phone camera being partially assembled as the chunks were coming in. So that was a really fun project, a really great outreach effort for NASA, and it proved that low-cost consumer electronics, like your phone, could actually work in space. From that point, we were like, wow, this is kind of exciting. Maybe we could do something more with this. And one of the problems with a phone is you only have one connector on the bottom, like a USB connector, and that was a problem for us because you couldn't connect anything interesting to it, really. And so we decided that phones themselves were not useful for building complex spacecraft, but the electronics inside them were. And if you went to the vendors that were selling the computers and selling the memory commercially, you could actually build a commercial spacecraft with no space components that might be cheaper than the ones we were building. And so we decided to go and actually move out of NASA, quit our jobs, and open a startup in a garage. And just in the spirit of being in Silicon Valley, we actually opened Will lived in a garage in Cupertino, about 4 blocks from Apple. And so we started PlanetLabs in Cupertino, right next to Apple, in a garage. And this is one of our engineers, our chief architect, Ben Howard, working on basically version 0 of our spacecraft. And you can see in this picture, it's not really a phone anymore. It's custom electronics, but it's all commercial. There's no space dock whatsoever. And one of the problems with being in a garage every morning was that I'd have to come in, open the roller door, and then sweep the leaves out that had blown in that night, and the dirt and the leaves and the trash that was blowing in from the garage door. So it wasn't really a good lab for building a spacecraft, but it was a really fun place. One of the things that we wanted to do was attract money for investment, and I think that's a theme that you've been looking at this week in the startup workshop. And how do you get investment? And I think the best advice I can give you about getting investment is to look very, very, very serious, and to tell the investors that you're doing this no matter what. And so here in this picture, you can see Tim Draper, the guy in the suit, and Steve Jurvetson in the check shirt from investment fund DFJ. DFJ was one of the early investors in SpaceX, and we met Steve in the desert when we were doing the PhoneSat launch. And he came around and looked at our lab, and when he showed up, he was surprised because we were actually building a spacecraft in the garage. And we weren't just talking about it, we were actually building it. And we were building it without him. And I think he just felt left out, and he decided to give us money. And so, just to sort of recap that point, I think the best way to raise money is to just do what you want to do and get started. Don't ask for permission, just start doing it. And then when investors come and look at it, and they see you're serious, and you've actually made progress, and that you look credible, and you look credible, then they'll support you. And it was very similar to what we did at NASA. In fact, I like to think that I learned to be an entrepreneur running these programs at NASA, where essentially we had to pitch new concepts like PhoneSat and then prove it by building the hardware. And so that's formula also worked for raising money, particularly in Silicon Valley, where they're excited to see the hardware, they were seeing the progress, and they really believed, based on what we'd done previously and what we were building now, that we could really do it. In fact, of all of the money that we've raised over the last 4 years, no one has ever actually done technical due diligence on us to see if we could build a satellite. They just believed us. And then, I'm very grateful for their trust, and I don't know if it was entirely deserved, but by looking at the hardware, they believed we could do it, and they never questioned that 3 guys from NASA could actually build a satellite company. So just build the hardware, get started, and potentially the money might show up. So what did we build? This is our Dove spacecraft. It's actually very, very simple. I like to think of it as a Linux-based webcam in space with solar panels and a radio. There's a giant computer in there, which is very similar to most laptop computers. There's a very, very large telescope, which takes up most of the 3-unit cube. So this is a 3U CubeSat. And you can see we have a bunch of radios on the lens cap, and we have solar panels. And the satellites essentially point down at the Earth. They take images, store them on the board. We use the same hard drive that you have in your MacBook Airs, actually. And so we have, whenever the MacBooks get a new hard drive, we actually upgrade our spacecraft as well. And this spacecraft is entirely aerospace industry free. There is not a single component sourced from the aerospace industry. All of it is commercial, off-the-shelf electronics from conventional supply chains that you have access to. One of the cool things we did was iterate very rapidly. And so unlike a very large program like the LADI program that I worked on, we didn't have a design that we polished and polished and polished and then waited 4 years to build. We actually released minimum viable product, an MVP. And the satellite you can see at the front in this picture doesn't actually have any of the other complex antennas on it. You can see it has just one patch antenna, and it only has body-mounted solar panels. So these spacecraft were our MVP, and actually the first pictures that we got from space were from a satellite that was only 30% feature complete. So stealing language from the software industry, we had a 30% feature complete minimum viable product that we launched in space, got a picture, and then proved that we could do what we said we were going to do, then raised more money to continue iterating the design. And so this agile approach to iterating hardware and moving towards your final 100% feature complete design worked really well for us. And so I think that's another really important tip is don't try and do everything at once. Just do the necessary part to get to the next step. And as long as you lock in progress, it's like a video game. You get to the next level, you're safe, then keep going. And so we didn't put all of our risk in one spacecraft design. We actually built 10. And it's only now in 2015 that we're releasing our 10th generation spacecraft, which is sort of the final feature complete version that has everything we wanted it to do. We had 2 launches that we did early on to prove this. There was a Soyuz launch and a Antares rocket that we had. They were spaced about a year apart, and we thought it'd be really nice to test generation 1 and then generation 2. But the way the launch industry works is all of the launches slipped, and until both of these rockets went from a year apart to only being 3 days apart. So it was kind of useless for our iterative tech demos. But even more ironic is that on the right, the Soyuz rocket, we were not attached to the upper stage, but we were actually attached to the Bion M capsule, which was going to go into orbit for 3 days before releasing us. So minus 3 days plus 3 days equals 0. And so these 2 rockets put our satellites into space 45 minutes apart from each other on the same day. And we were doing the first ground station pass of the Soyuz spacecraft as the Antares rocket was taking off on its maiden flight from Virginia. And I remember very nervously telling my mission control team, okay, guys, you got to stop watching the launch feed now. Okay, screen's off, back to mission control. We've got to pass in 26 seconds. And it was a really, really fun day. And we contacted both of our satellites 45 minutes apart and got our first pictures back. So if you remember the phone sat picture I showed you, that was our first picture from a phone camera, this is what we got from our first Dove satellite. And I remember we were downloading this picture, I think, at about 3 a.m., very similar time to now, actually, for me. And we got the picture. I remember being very excited. We ran it through our decompression system, got the Bayer mask image and turned it back into color. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I emailed it to my co-founder, Will, who was asleep at the time. And about 4 hours later, he woke up, checked his email, and saw this picture. And he was so moved that he stayed in bed for about 3 hours crying, looking at the picture. Because this really represented everything we'd wanted to do. This was a picture from space that was high enough resolution, that we could see agriculture, we could see forests, we could see individual trees, we could see roads. And so this really summed up why we started PlanetLabs, which was to image the Earth, to help with the environment, and to help with humanitarian causes. And it was all summed up in this single first picture. And you have no idea how lucky we got that first day, that it wasn't cloudy or something. And so with this, we were able to move forward and actually start building lots and lots of satellites. And so we moved out of the garage, and by this point, and we had a small production facility in an office downtown San Francisco. And the mayor came around and saw this production line, the mayor of San Francisco, and now he likes to joke to the other mayors that he has a space program. And this is his PlanetLabs is San Francisco's space program. And we still manufacture all of our satellites downtown San Francisco in a small office. So here you can see the first delivery of satellites that we sent to the space station. Beginning in January last year, on another Antares, we sent up our first batch of satellites to the station. And here's a really cool picture of them arriving on the Cygnus capsule, getting to the station. And this video shows the deployment. It's not very good at your end, but you can see some of the doves coming out into space. So hopefully you can see them wink at you there at the end. And then from another angle, this one's very cool too. So it's very rare on a normal rocket that you would get a picture of your satellite. But by launching from the space station, you can actually get beautiful images like this. This image was a photograph hand taken by one of the astronauts, Koichi Wakata, from the window of the space station with his Nikon SLR camera. And there is no amount of money that I could pay a marketing firm to create an image as beautiful as this to represent our company. And so I'm very grateful to NASA and JAXA for letting us use this photo. But I think it's just beautiful, and I love seeing the Earth and the satellites there. And then this is a close-up of two of them disappearing out of view away from the space station. So I know that my fingerprints and probably some dog and cat hair from our garage is stuck in the glue on these solar panels in space. So what is this all for? We don't want just single pictures like the one we showed before, but PlanetLabs wants to map the entire world. So very recently, we've started imaging and tasking the satellites to build a giant mosaic. And this is one of our early prototypes, was let's try and take a photograph of something really, really interesting. And in this case, the Suez Canal in Egypt. And in this picture, you can see a little bit of a journey down the canal as seen by one of our satellites. And I think this is a composite of about 200 images. So you can see ships in the canal. You can see the wakes of the ships as they're moving. And then down below here in the bitter sea, you can see ships that are parked and that are waiting to go up the canal. And so, in this image, you can see a lot of economic activity. You can see farming and agriculture. You can see human impact on the environment. You can see things of, potential, monetary value. So it's a really cool image showing one of our use cases. Another really cool one, I don't know who likes coffee, but we have some bad news about, world coffee production. This is a photograph from the Minas Gerais Reservoir in Brazil, where 30% of the world's coffee is grown. And you can see in this picture that the reservoir is at record low water levels. And all of this beautiful yellow and orange sort of swirly patterns are actually the edges of the reservoir. And you can see that there's so much exposed bank on the side of the water that the lake is actually at a record low water level. And that's really bad news for agriculture in the region. You can also see farmland and roads and really cool things in this image. In terms of humanitarian applications, I think you all might remember in the World Cup in 2004 in Brazil, there was a lot of controversy about people in the favelas being moved out to make room for the World Cup events. And so we have, from the time, direct photographic evidence of this. So this is an image of Sao Paulo. And if you check in this blue region, in this image, I go to the next slide, you can see from one of our photos that the actual piece of, the settlement has been removed and replaced by park. And this was really big news, during the World Cup, and still remains an issue today. And so those are just some flavors of the type of applications that we can do with our data. And with that, I'm finished, and would like to, if there's time for questions, answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So, are there any questions here to Chris?
Hi. So how much does one of your satellites cost by now?
Cool. Well, that is the only secret that we have. So, we're generally pretty open and transparent, but that's the only number we've never published. But an article in Science magazine, I guess, came out today and quoted the price as less than $1 million, including launch per satellite. So that's the official number, I guess.
Hi, Chris. This is Frank from ESA. One question: I think our NASA colleagues were very supportive in the launch. How supportive? Can you say that? Because I think this is something maybe startups in Europe would like to have the same from our organization. So, how much NASA charged you for the launch from the ISS?
Yeah. The launch to the ISS is actually through a third-party company called NanoRacks. And NanoRacks commercial rates are pretty reasonable. They're pretty comparable, I think, to what you would pay for a CubeSat on a primary rocket going to space. So we work very closely with them in partnership. And one of the, I think, the best things they offer is not just the ride to space. They do all of the NASA paperwork. And I was always very bad at my paperwork when I was at NASA. And now I've got somebody to do my paperwork for me. So it's like kind of paying somebody to do my homework. And so NanoRacks provide a really excellent service, abstracting out the US government interface and making it friendly for companies. So if you want to get something up there, I just encourage you to talk to them. And I think their rates are very good, and the service is excellent.
Okay.
Hi. What's your satellite lifespan?
Sorry, I missed that question.
What's your satellite lifespan? The average lifespan.
Sorry, lifespan. I see. Yeah. The primary limitation is the orbital altitude. So from the from ISS orbits at 400 kilometers, the lifetime is between 6 and 9 months, based on orbital decay. But the design lifetime of the spacecraft is 2 years. So all of the ones that we've put in higher altitudes, like sun-synchronous orbits, are still working, almost 2 years in. And we think they probably might last as long as 4 years.
Hi, Julian from Belgium. During this startup weekend, we probably come up with some business models. So at some point you had a great vision, wanted to map the entire Earth on a daily basis. But what is your business model? Like, at what point did you freeze it and say, hey, I'm going to sell pictures, or I'm going to make, I don't know, analytics, or I'm going to make some money? But how do you come up with this, and what is currently your business model?
Yeah, so for us, I think we the company is interesting because we've got a number of opportunities to make money. One of the things that we're doing is also completely modernizing how imagery gets distributed. So we're using completely modern web frameworks and APIs to get the data out. And so even that business of distributing images more effectively is valuable. I think one of the interesting things about a good business plan is there's more than one way to make money in the plan. I think also another thing about getting started and getting funded is a lot of our early investors told us to not worry about the money, and that if you do something really good, if the thing you're doing is intrinsically valuable and it creates value for society, the mechanism for finding that value and returning that value to you and the investors sort of just shows up. And so it's more important to create something that you think is valuable and useful than it is to worry about what the business plan is. And so we actually had no business plan. Actually, to this day, we have no written business plan for this company. The intention is just do something that is valuable, get that value and share it with people, and the rest is just details. So that's my best advice.
Hello, this is Joe from Germany. And do you have any device installed for steering the satellites, or?
Sorry, could someone repeat the question?
Can you steer the satellites, or do you have anything to?
Oh, steering. Yeah, sorry. The audio sometimes drops out at my end. The satellites have a full 3-axis control system. So we have reaction wheels and magnetorquers for momentum dumping, and they're able to fully control their attitude. We can point anywhere we want, task the satellites, and when we're passing over ground stations, we track the ground station to increase the signal quality. So it's a very capable space platform.
Hi, my name is Kartik. Firstly, congratulations on a great business and doing a lot of really innovative stuff in a booming space. One of the questions I have is, having read the book by Peter Thiel, 0 to 1, one of the things that he mentions is actually to avoid competition. And the space that you're in seems quite competitive. So I was wondering whether you've made any attempts to stay away from competition, or if you're actively looking to compete with others in the space, particularly even in the Bay Area.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that we did was very early on, we looked at what the competition was doing, and we created a number of different graphs, I guess, sort of like Pareto frontier analyses of where the competition is. What is the industry standard for cost per satellite versus resolution? What is the difference between spectral bands and resolution, or repeat rate and revisit rate on the ground versus resolution? And we decided we were just going to do something very different. So most people want high resolution imagery. We decided to do high repeat rate and high coverage imagery, which is a product that doesn't exist. Most Google Maps images, if you look at Google Maps, the images are about 3 years old. And, there's always these really strange connections between the images. Like, they're from 5 different satellites. The images don't line up correctly. They're different colors. And so we went off to solve those problems. Our imagery is very, very fresh because we cover the whole Earth. Our imagery fits together very nicely because we map the whole Earth at the same time. But we don't have the resolution. So we really went away from where the competition was and created a product that doesn't exist, and that's valuable. And then if we wanted to do something similar, now the company's established, and if we want to increase our resolution, we can, because we've already got revenue coming in from the product we built. So our strategy was build something different than what existed.
Hi, Chris. Ross Findlay, DLR. I'd also like to firstly congratulate you. I think it's a really cool idea. A lot of what I hear in Europe is that this idea would only work in Silicon Valley. I know you're not originally American. I wonder what are your opinions on this, and what we could also learn from the community and culture there in the US. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the most useful thing that I find, so I'm Australian, and it's the group of like-minded people. I think a little known fact about Silicon Valley is almost nobody here who is successful is an American. Almost everybody is an expatriate visiting from somewhere else. And the reason why they do that is because everyone else is doing it. and they get to hang out and be part of a community that is discussing things that are interesting. So Silicon Valley is really a network effect based on people of like-minded interests. So I think it doesn't mean that you have to be in Silicon Valley. The lesson is hang out with people that are like you and want to solve problems and want to spend their time on it. And when I was in Australia, the biggest problem was nobody else wanted to do what I was doing. I was kind of strange. And I was like always the strange kid. I didn't have a job. I wasn't, motivated to get a normal job. I was not normal. And when I'm hanging out with other Australians, quite often I feel different, and they are not very encouraging. If I say, hey, come and work on this startup for me. I remember when I was 19, 20, 21, 25, trying to start companies, and my friends always got this close to starting with me, but they never could do it. And so it was only when I left and went and found the international community of people at the Space Generation that I found people who wanted to take the same risks as me. So you don't have to be in Silicon Valley, but you do have to be with people that are going to keep you going. They're going to keep you thinking. They're going to keep encouraging you, and they're not going to give up. And so finding someone who will hold you accountable and will push you forward is the main thing, I think. And that's very hard to get when you're in your hometown hanging out with your parents. So that's go and seek that out and find that.
Okay, last 3 questions.
Hi, my name is Jose from Zero to Infinity. I would like to hear a few words from you about what you think about the nascent market of dedicated micro and nano satellite launchers, and if you think that that might be of use to your company or other companies with making small satellites. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think I'm very encouraging of micro launch and nano launch. I think that it's going to solve a couple of really cool problems. If you remember from my story, the two first satellites we launched were, almost a year late. One of them actually was almost 2 years late. And I didn't tell you this at the time, but we didn't launch Generation 1 and Generation 2. Those rockets were so late, we actually launched Generation 4 and Generation 6. So I didn't launch my first 3 generations of spacecraft because the rockets were so late. And so I think that responsive launch capacity is so important because it doesn't solve the cost problem, but it solves the responsiveness problem. So if you want to build companies like ours and actually go faster than us, I think that those kinds of launch are going to be really important for people to move very quickly and make really disruptive products. So if you can get to launch really quickly, that's exciting.
Hi. My question is, you started out as 3 guys from NASA, so how important was it to know the industry, know how NASA works in order to accomplish what you accomplished? Do you have that inside scoop?
Could someone just repeat the question?
Let me try it again. So you started out as 3 guys from NASA, so you had the inside scoop of knowing how the industry works. Do you have to have that in order to found something in this area, or can you be an outsider and still accomplish something?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So I don't know if you caught this, but I actually didn't follow any of the rules when I was at NASA. And so I didn't really have a conventional experience, but partly it was the brand, I think, more than the actual experience. And I think that really helped. It was a sort of, credibility building thing. So, I don't know for sure if we would have been as successful if we hadn't been at NASA. But I didn't do any of the conventional things at NASA. I was really just running startups inside NASA, exactly the same as I was on the outside. So I think it's partly brand, definitely not direct experience because I didn't have any. And I think partly just the success of the small things we've done. So I'd say a little bit of both.
Hi, Chris. This is Steve Ringler, a space enthusiast from Northern California, now living in the UK. Good to see you again. I just wanted to ask if you have an example of one of the biggest challenges PlanetLabs has faced as a company and how you overcame it.
Yeah, I'd say launch has been one of our biggest challenges, and the cadence of launch. And we had a rocket explode on us last year, at the end of the year. We had 26 satellites on their way to the space station, and the Antares rocket was destroyed about 14 seconds after launch. So we lost 26 satellites. Actually, funny story, they found 8 of them on the beach at the launch site that weren't destroyed, and they sent them back. And so we have 8 satellites that have basically been burnt and full of beach sand, but we got them back. But that launch was a problem for us because we wanted to get more satellites into space, build our capacity, and that set us back in terms of building our product, because now we'd lost about half of our fleet that we were going to have this year. But unlike other companies, we were able to survive that event because our satellites are cheap and we launch large numbers of them. And so losing 30 of, say, the 100 we want to launch was only 30% in the end, not 100%. So we didn't lose everything. So our strategy of building small satellites and launching lots of them helped us survive a really bad event like a launch failure. One of the biggest problems for me was that I had, I think, about 10 new technologies that I wanted to prove in our version 10, our generation 10 design, and they all got destroyed. And so those demos didn't get to space. And so we had to very quickly build 2 more spacecraft with some of those features. And about 9 days after the explosion, we got those on a different ride on a SpaceX rocket up to station. And so we were able to quickly build 2 satellites to test some of those ideas and get them into orbit. So, you know, dealing with launch schedule and access to space is probably our biggest challenge, and it's an ongoing problem. And anyone who wants to work on nano launch, I think, please do so. I would love to use it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Chris. Let's give it up and thank him for tuning in.
Great. Thanks for having me, guys.
So Chris is going to get a well-deserved night of sleep right now, so thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Greetings
Bye, guys.
to San Francisco. Bye. Okay, so we're going to move on. Now we have Amnon Ginati, Head of Integrated and Telecommunications Applications at ESA. He's someone last minute add-on to the list of speakers. And Amnon is going to describe a bit the integrated applications, which is actually a great domain for startups to also get involved in and find partners across different member states and also with universities to create projects and applications. So,
thank you very much, Sebastian. Good morning to everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here and to see all of you. It was spontaneous reactions. I was invited because I'm here, I live here, and I came to do something in my garden, and so I'm here just to share with you what actually ESA have developed in the last 5 years. Actually, we are 50 years in space, and we develop usually the upstream, the satellite. Much more expensive that we have heard from our colleague now from across the oceans, but there are different requirements, different customer like EUMETSAT, meteorology, like Galileo, the navigation, the European system. 5 years ago, the Director General decided to focus also on the downstream, space for daily life. So we have created a program which is called Integrated Application Promotion. This program is nothing else, is to use what has been developed in space to generate services and application on the ground. And we have taken few examples that we wanted to show how this really can contribute. So one of the example was, I will give you a few examples to give you a feeling what space can do. Actually, there is no limit. Space has no limits on the ideas. We started with following migrating birds. Migrating birds create a lot of problem for the airlines, but also for the military who fly low. So we have today in Northwest Europe forecast and real-time detection of informations distributed to the pilot in real time to avoid certain grids. This is very useful tools, but also the airlines are using that today. So actually, if you can see, you create the Google bird in Northwest Europe. It's being expanded to Africa. So if you see white stork leaving Africa, you can see they leave just few days before the temperature increased to 40 degrees. They fly to Europe, they stay in Turkey, and for 1 week, 2 weeks, and nobody understands why. If you look at their target destination, Poland, for example, that's still very cold temperature. So what's happened is, few days before the temperature rise, they start to move toward Poland. Actually, our meteorologists could watch the birds and make a better forecast of weather and temperature changes on the climate. So we learned very fascinating things. Another example that I want to share with you is that in Ireland, I was invited for proposals that they have generated. They did not receive any funding, and this is a problem of Europe. We are very conservative. Young people like you, who have no money, have good idea. We can give up to 50% funding. And about the other 50%, it's a problem. Therefore, what we are doing, we identify customers or users or investors who can cover the other 50% for those good ideas if they are selected. And the idea in Ireland was how to harvest trees, forest. And the question is, Ireland, there is almost no forest. How come two young guys develop fantastic tools, which Google want to buy, by the way, of mapping for harvesting trees? The quality of the tree, the ripeness of the tree to be harvested, and so on. The whole machine is automatically. So I met these two young guys. We gave them 750,000 for support to start up. And the idea that I asked, where you got the idea from? Actually, these two young guys went to Finland to visit their girlfriend. They went to walk for a walk in the forest, and they saw still people measuring the tree with band, looking at the algorithmic table, and making X, which tree shall be harvested, which not. Very old-fashioned method. So went back home and said, there's no way, we need to develop a new concept. So they developed a new concept. This concept is today really very requested. There are many businesses that are doing, selling this kind of automatic harvesting machine. So they map it, and the machines know exactly which tree shall be cut, and so on, which tree is not ready. Another example that I want to share with you is that you know that there are many people working from Africa and Europe that transfer the money to their village in Africa. And you know that the banks take about 20%. And it takes almost 2 or 3 months until the money comes to the family or to the mother. This is not fair. Two young guys from Belgium came with the idea, we'll do money transfer to Africa. And we help them. They have now 39 countries. So how does it work? The money goes within hours, and they charge maybe 5 cents per euro. So it's almost 4 billion euro going to the pocket of the family in Africa. Therefore, is the value adding of this, it's fantastic. It's not only the monetary that they are making business, 39 countries in Africa, but also they are expanding. And to expand, ESA cannot fund, so we just give the initial funding. We have identified investor who give the money to roll out to other countries. So actually, we are looking for raw diamonds. So if you have good ideas, regardless where it's coming from, there is a great possibilities to promote those ideas, not only in co-funding, but also in creating and looking for user community and partner for you to roll out those business. And as I'm coming from the satellite business, in Berlin, I developed the first European university satellite. I can tell you that ESA started to build microsatellite for services, for detection of ships and others. So we have plenty of ideas that we would like to roll it out. With that introduction, I want to tell you that from the 300 activity projects that we are supporting, we have looked at socioeconomic benefits. About 168 projects, out of those 60% have managed to roll out to the market. We are considering about 19 projects that we have checked. We had enough measures, 10 indicators. And I can tell you from the 19 indicators, we invested about 27 million. And today they have more than 107 million in the books, mean factor 4 to 1. In 2020, they expect 550 million, mean factor 20 to 1. With this number, we are showing to investor they are very much interested to look for those projects we are supporting, because they are looking, nobody trusts the banks today, and they are looking for good idea where they can put the money. De facto, I would like to encourage, and I think it's a great idea to do this workshop here, maybe the beginning of a whole series of activities here. ESA will be more than delighted to support the initiators, but also you guys, with the raw diamond idea to be submitted, so you can check our address, integrate application. I saw there are some Polish colleagues here who run few projects, and maybe for you also, we have Space for Mediterranean. It's a fund that European Investment Bank is giving to develop activity in Mediterranean region, but also in Africa. So actually we are not limiting to Europe itself. We are, space has no boundaries. Therefore, good idea, whenever they are, we can promote. So I wish you good luck, successful weekend, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Amnon. So when you, those of you that will do the space applications workshop, you'll find out more about integrated applications and how to use that maybe as a springboard to go further with your startup idea and maybe develop a raw diamond idea that could become a potential application for ESA. So we need to move fast on because the tours are starting soon. But we have Deputy Minister for the City of Bremen, Heiner Heseler, here, who will address a few words before you go off and actually find out what Bremen as a city has to offer. And Bremen is the host city for the first ever Startup Weekend Space. We're very happy that they've given us the support to host this event here and to do this amazing event. So Deputy Minister Heiner Heseler, please.
Thank you very much. I would like to welcome here in Bremen in the European Space City, European Space Hub of Bremen. I give only a few words because you will see in today and tomorrow the institutions and companies here in Bremen who are producing, who are working in the space sector. We have a very long tradition in aviation and space industry, and we are the only city in Germany, and I believe in Europe too, who are the two big producers of space, satellites, rockets, and so together we have OHB, a very dynamic company who started 40 years ago and is today one of the global players in the space sector, and the other is, you know it, Airbus Defence and Space. He is a very good company here in Bremen, and Bremen is the center of the manned space sector, and we have many research institutes. You will see the DLR Institute for Strategic Studies in the space sector, the Institute for Artificial Intelligence, who is very active and very famous in the sector of robotics. Robotics not only in the space. We say we combine robotics in the sea, in the deep sea, and in the space. And this is very important technologies of the future. And third institute is the SAM, the Center of Microgravitation. You can see from here, if you leave this building, the drop tower. It's a very interesting drop tower. It's the only, I believe, in my opinion, it's the only drop tower in the world, because the other we have visited, the drop tower in Beijing, is a little bit smaller and not so high sophisticated. And so we are planning to build a second drop tower. This would be very unique for the world and is very important for Bremen as a space hub. And we have some other institutions at the university. For example, the Institute for Umweltphysik, I don't know the English name in the moment, and is very active in the field of Earth observation and so. And in this time at OHB, OHB is building 30 satellites. And you know, these satellites in some years will start the Galileo system, the alternative for GPS. And so we have many industries, many research activities in this field could be very interesting for you. And I think I have understand that you are interesting to make startups in the space sector. We have some startups have had it in the past 30, 40 years ago, Focke-Wulf and some other companies. OHB is a very good startup, and I hope you were successful in this sector. And I would like to thank the organizers of this first very interesting meeting. I hope you have good success, and I wish you nice days here in Bremen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Minister Heseler. So now we need to move fast. So everyone that is supposed to be on the Airbus tour, I need you out right now. So if you don't know that you're on the Airbus tour, check your badge. On the right side, there's this nice abstract square. If the square in the middle is filled out, you're on Airbus. So everyone else, please stay seated. Only the people going on the Airbus tour, please go out now. Only Airbus, please. The rest will have lunch here at the BITS, and then you will go on your on the other tours. But Airbus, they need to go fast because they need to actually go to the other side of town, which is a bit of a way. So, all right. Anyone else for Airbus? Okay. Are we good? Okay, so the rest of you, please proceed to lunch, enjoy, network, exchange ideas, and come back refreshed for your pitches this afternoon.